Hello everyone, welcome back to an in-depth playthrough of Pathways into Darkness. First off, I'm going to show you how to get out of this pyramid. We ended on the save room right here. We'll talk about all the possible endings. There's multiple endings in this game. We'll talk about the final score that we get and different ways, you can improve the score beyond what I get. We'll talk about some items that were left out of the game that are left in the script. We'll talk about my final thoughts on the game. And then also we'll read the epilogue from the official hint book and have a few closing comments on it. There's a couple ways out of this pyramid. You could either go through this, through Beware of Low-Flying Monsters up to a Plague of Demons, all the way through a Plague of Demons, to this ladder to Feel the Power, all the way through Feel the Power to the ground floor. Another way you can go is you can go up to the labyrinth, go for the labyrinth down to Happy Carnage. From Happy Carnage, you just go across, take this ladder up to We Can See in the Dark, Can You? And go through to Welcome Tasty Primate, out to these 4 ladders that take you up to Wrong Way, and then take the ladder to the ground floor. If you wanted to on that route, you could also go from Happy Carnage, go through the secret exit, take that middle ladder up to, one second, Plague of Demons, which takes you close to this ladder, which you can just take up to Feel the Power and go through Feel the Power. I think that I tested the other 2 ways. I didn't try this way through a Plague of Demons through the secret, so maybe I'll just take that way. I don't know which way is the fastest. Avoiding We Can see through the dark, so I don't have to turn off my flashlight would be nice. But on a Plague of Demons, you gotta have your infrared goggles on, but that's a short distance. So maybe we'll try going to the secret and see how that goes. Either way, it seems like they're all pretty similar as far as distance. Okay, here we are. Let's see where we're at. Okay, so we're facing this way. So let's go ahead and get out. And we're not gonna rest anymore. We have the clear blue potions, so we're just gonna scramble out of here as fast as we can. So we're at the top right, and we need to go to the top left. So I'm not gonna look behind me unless, one shows up and is attacking me. I'll just take the hits. Oh, there's like none. I'm almost guarantee you I'm gonna see some at the end though. Well, maybe not. Wow, that's the first time I got through the labyrinth without having to fight anyone. And there was one right there. Alright, so here we are. Now we're just going to the bottom left of the map to go to the secret. This is probably the farthest I gotta run, is through this. Hello. There's the secret. I hope you guys have been enjoying this playthrough. The game does take a while to walk anywhere, so there's that. It can sometimes make it a little dull at night. There's not a ton, I'll talk about it more at the end, but there's not tons of things to talk about in this game, which is why I think, moving on to Marathon, I think is going to be a lot better. So I feel like the Myth playthrough is much more interesting than this one, but I don't really care, I just shoot. I know where he is. Oh. Okay, so now we just gotta go through Feel the Power. We'll probably fight some oozes on the way. There's one. Honestly, I could go back to my Walther P4 since there's like single enemies, just to improve my accuracy to help with my score. But nah. Okay, so I go left here, okay. Oozes are actually a good enemy to improve your accuracy on because they just take so many hits. So I'm sure I'm gonna see some oozes over here. There we go. Man, these Ichi magazines just tear through the oozes. Barely tap the space bar to try to avoid shooting extra bullets. Okay, this is the ground floor. Actually, we didn't use up any heals. That's pretty impressive. And we still got a couple hours, I think, before the bomb goes off, so we got plenty of time. But anyways, here's gonna be the ending up here. So if you remember, this is where we started. And here's this door that we... Excuse me, here's this door and it won't open, but if we take the might as well just use a clear blue potion here real quick. Go in our lead box, take the alien gemstone out, and then the door will open. And then there's a bunch of monsters to greet us. You could like get your green crystal ready. But there's that. They were taking some damage from the Zillion Gemstone, but the game's over. You have escaped the pyramid. The extraction team picks you up and carries you to safely, right on schedule. The bomb detonation and burying the dream of God. There's our final score. So before we discuss the final score, let's talk about like other possible endings. So you saw that text on the screen with the endings. Well, here's some other possible ones you can get. All of these endings are really just a different quote that you will get depending on the situation. The ending you get can also impact your final score. How you achieve each ending is pretty self-explanatory. There are two different endings that can be achieved while still within the pyramid, which could be considered game overs depending on how you look at it. These are: the dreaming god has awakened, you hardly even remember dying. There's an in-game sound that you will hear if the sleeping god awakens while you are resting. The next ending is, well, the good news is that you successfully detonated the nuclear bomb. Ferris would be proud, and this is reference to the slogan Ferric Victory. And then there are 6 endings that can be achieved if you manage to escape the pyramid. They are: you have escaped the pyramid. Unfortunately, you forgot to arm the nuclear device and the world will soon be destroyed despite all your heroics under the pyramid. You have escaped the pyramid. Unfortunately, you set the bomb to detonate after the god had already awakened. Oops! The world will soon be destroyed. You have escaped the pyramid. Unfortunately, you don't have a radio beacon and the bomb goes off before you are able to reach a safe distance on foot. You have died. But look on the bright side. At least you saved the planet. You have escaped the pyramid. Unfortunately, you don't have a radio beacon and you are forced to escape on foot. It takes you 8 hours, but you finally reach the extraction team in safety. You have won. You have escaped the pyramid. Unfortunately, the bomb goes off before the extraction team is able to retrieve and carry you to safety. You have died. At least everyone else in the world won't suffer the same fate. You have escaped the pyramid. The extraction team picks you up and carries you to safety. Right on schedule, the bomb detonates and buries the dreaming god. You have won. Obviously, the last ending is the best ending you can get. in the game and will reward you with the most points. So before we talk about the final score, let's talk about the point total you can get from items, which is accounted for but strangely not shown on the final screen. In this playthrough we got a total of 44 points from items that were picked up. The game lists the score as 44 points out of a total of 41 points. There is a discussion on PID.bungie.org discussing exactly why the point total doesn't match the number of points we can get in-game. If you exclude the Easter egg, then the max point total would be 42, which would make sense to list in-game as to not give away the fact that there is an in-game secret area. Regardless, I made a point and treasure breakdown for the items you can find within the game. There is actually a screenshot within the game manual that shows a different score point limit that was likely from the demo version A1. You should know that the treasure value will be lost if you drop items with a price listed in the game. The same rule does not apply to the items that increase your point total though. Once you pick up an item, you will permanently keep the points from that item even if you drop it. With the total points, you don't get additional points for duplicate items, but you do for treasure. And as you can see from my point total breakdown, there's a total of 4 points for weapons, a total of 12 points for the crystals, a total of 22 points for other usable items, and that's 299.3k in treasure, and a total of 6 points for unusable items, and those add up to 644.1k in treasure. So your grand total is 44 points and 943.4k in treasure. Now, with this understanding the in-game total treasure breakdown, let's take a look at how the score is calculated and what kind of maximum scores you could possibly see. The carnage score calculates the number of bodies throughout the pyramid. There really isn't a maximum number of enemies that can be killed, so this score basically has no limit. You have to balance the number of monsters killed with the time you lose, but it should be fairly easy to kill 250 monsters in less than 10 hours. I bet clearing the labyrinth over and over would be the fastest way to go if you were trying to get the maximum carnage points possible. Not only does it have a large respawn rate, but the monsters also reset every time you enter the labyrinth. Next is the accuracy bonus, which is pretty self-explanatory. You can get a maximum of 6 points if you never miss a shot throughout the whole game. You get 1 point for each 10% accuracy over 40%, rounded down. The MP41 and AK-47 will almost certainly bring down your accuracy as you'll end up shooting extra bullets after killing an enemy. For the treasure score, we got the maximum treasure score that is possible within this version of the game. On the Mac versions, you could get a higher score by duplicating the silver medals, but they are only worth 0.1k, and thus you would need 566 of them to get to where you are able to increase your treasure score. This is because you get a treasure point score for every 100k. From what I have read, in the Mac versions, you could only carry a maximum of 256 copies of a specific item, so that would make it impossible to use them to increase your score. In version 1.1, there was the glitch to get additional alien gemstones, which could give you a higher treasure score also. We've already discussed the time bonus when we discussed setting the bomb. Here's that breakdown for you again. The mission bonus is for setting the bomb before the Dreaming God awakens, and the survival bonus is for making it out alive. I'm not sure if there are any other alternative mission and survival point bonuses you can get for the other victory conditions or not. This is definitely the maximum possible for those categories though. The last interesting thing on this stat sheet is the damage inflicted and taken along with the damage ratio. For whatever reason, the damage inflicted is divided by 3. Since technically you can't see any of the weapon damage or creature hit point values, the typical player wouldn't know this to be the case, as the number would be somewhat arbitrary without understanding what is going on within the game coding. Moving on, the scripting for demo version A1 had several strings within the game coding that describe items that do not appear within the game. This leather satchel is quite old and brittle. A faded swastika is still visible on the flap. Although there is nothing inside the hoop, the area circumscribed by the ring of brass seems to shimmer slightly. You notice that your hand, when it passes through the hoop, does not appear on the other side. You don't notice anything interesting about the brown cloak. The bracelet, carved from a solid piece of opal, is slightly warm to the touch. The intricate carvings circling the band have long since been rubbed away into obscurity. Double-click on the bracelet to put it on or take it off. The strange statuette is of a humanoid figure bending over something you don't quite recognize. This ornate scepter must be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars for its raw materials and probably twice that as an art object. This is a very simple staff of hard wood covered with strange glyphs and pictures. It hums with a faint internal energy. The ornate gold mask depicts a vaguely human face in great pain. Double-click on the mask to put it on or take it off. The brown crystal is very rough in texture. Before we go on to the epilogue and finish the game, I thought you guys would enjoy hearing some of my final thoughts on the game. I really like that this game has a story behind it. The story is both interesting and not overly complicated that you can't feel like you are part of it. The environment matches the game and things for the most part fit within the context of the game. At the same time, things are left to the imagination of the player and not overly explained, which is a very nice touch. For example, you can talk to the dead, and it seems somewhat plausible in this situation that you would be able to communicate with them. It doesn't feel out of place, and at the same time, the game gives lots of room for your imagination to run wild on exactly why this is the case. This game would have been better if they had delved even deeper into this. They could have given us a few more nuggets to help our imagination run on how the Nazis discovered the pyramid and whether the demon was a manifestation from the demon god, and so on. More unique items with hidden pieces of lore behind them could have added a lot also. In the end, they did a good job for a first hit, but at the same time the game can feel a little void because there aren't quite enough things to grab your attention from a plot perspective. There are also a lot of conversation pieces, for example, that feel kind of filler rather than giving you really interesting information. In studying this game, I often felt like I had to scrap a little bit to find interesting things to talk about, rather than like my Myth in-depth playthrough where there was an abundance of interesting things to talk about. The good news is though that this is something that Bungie improves on in future games. From a gameplay perspective, the game is meant to be a little scary, and it's hard for me to really judge it much based on that because in today's day it is really not scary at all. If I had played it back at the time when it came out, I would probably think much differently about that aspect though. In the same respect, compared to today's games, this game is fairly easy. I know people probably found this game quite challenging at the time, so that sort of feel is lost in the gaming world today. Perhaps it is just because I played Doom as a kid though, as the gameplay is just a slower version of that. With those things in mind, I still think the gameplay is pretty good for one big reason, and that is level design. You almost always feel like there is some new challenge or puzzle to solve, and the game hardly feels redundant at all. This is a very strong aspect of the game that a large portion of games today completely fail at. It is a breath of fresh air to be able to play through a game and not feel like you are just doing the same thing over and over. Overall, this is still an interesting game that can be enjoyed even today. It certainly could have been much better, but as Bungie's first game that started to get them some real attention, it is a good starting point for them to build upon and still a solid game on its own front. What do you guys think? Do you think I gave it a fair evaluation? Before we close this series, there is a short epilogue in the official hint book that tells a short story about what happened after Sergeant Eddings escaped the pyramid. Shortly after Sergeant Eddings' return, a research team was sent to investigate the area outside the small radiation zone to determine any possible effects the pyramid had on its surroundings. The investigator team found a tribe of Native Americans, the Tiacocha, that lived near the pyramid, perhaps for centuries. The tribe, unknown to the world at large, was recognized by several of the researchers. In addition, a large portion of the tribe members had been educated in the larger cities of Mexico or in the United States. Meanwhile, Sergeant Eddings, in front of several members of the military's top brass, as well as a large number of the military scientists, demonstrated what he termed his ice crystal. Eddings had frozen several objects solid when the crystal suddenly shattered, almost into fine powder. Eddings is recorded as smiling, saying, "Show's over, that's the last of the crystals," and walking away. He also described several bizarre creatures. A few of these descriptions were soon confirmed when nearly half the Tleo-Kachin tribe told of seeing Eddings' headless zombies and ghouls. There were no significant differences in any of these accounts, including the sergeants. In addition, many of the Tleo-Kacha gave detailed specific descriptions that were also consistent. A short time after this demonstration, Sergeant Eddings disappeared for a few days. He claims and still maintains that he went on vacation. It is suspected that he somehow smuggled the other crystals and perhaps other artifacts out of the pyramid and used these few days to hide or destroy them. Sergeant Eddings has denied this repeatedly. In the official handbook draft, there was an error where the epilogue mistakenly said that Eddings demonstrated a fire crystal rather than an ice crystal, which was clearly a mistake because it still said that he used it to freeze things. The interesting part though is that it said he used the crystal to freeze several test animals instead of several objects. Anyways, check out this quote from Hamish Sinclair on PID.bungie.org about the epilogue. In February 97, I had the opportunity to ask Jason Jones about the additional story text and the reasoning behind adding it to the official handbook. Jason offered this interesting insight. The Pathways handbook was written by a friend of mine, and I wasn't closely involved in the project. We thought it'd be a cool idea to write the handbook like it was the journal of the hero of Pathways, written after the fact. I think we made several mistakes, naming the player character being one of them, but the overall effect was something like we intended. The important thing about the handbook epilogue was to make all the player characters' artifacts from the pyramid disappear from circulation before the marathon story begins. Curious to know who they were in 2472 though, or who was really responsible for the projection in the spring of 1994. Curious indeed. I've not played Marathon, but Hamish Sinclair has told me that the universes are in fact tied together. As several of you know, the future plans for this channel are to jump into the Marathon series next. Did the Jarl come back to finish the job? How exactly does this story fit into Marathon? Perhaps we will find out in the next in-depth series covering Bungie's Marathon.